today's lecture is devoted to the medieval period, a period of transition from ancient Greek and Roman culture, which we studied during the first two lectures, to the Renaissance period and to the 17th century, when we can say modern science was born, with such figures as Galileo, um, and Descartes, Newton, and others. So we have to follow this period of transition. I think especially it is, well, logical if we take this evolutionary view, which was developed by Charles Darwin in the middle of the 19th century. So uh, you see, biologists, evolutionists, they are seeking for so-called intermediate forms. So we, being historians of science, also are looking for those intermediate forms. So for us, no period is void of meaning. Okay, so the medieval period is also important because somehow the evolution continued. So something happened. Also, if you are studying mathematics, you also understand what is this um, uh, like uninterrupted function or continuous function. So, well, of course, there can be functions that undergo some distortion. So, you understand. We in Russian say разрыв. Well, maybe there's an English word for that, разрыв функций. But well, I think you understand what I mean, that some functions are not continuous. Well, and it was the opinion that medieval period was like a black hole, that's like a dark ages. So something terrible happened during this period, and so the human spirit was just as if exterminated. This was the opinion of Hegel, whom we cited already several times. But I think this opinion of Hegel is a little bit over, exaggerated, I would say. So better take this evolutionist view, and which was developed by Charles Darwin, and seek the intermediate forms. So we'll start today with the first question is Christianity and Neoplatonism. So Christianity is a religion which was born in the Middle East, and the Jewish people played a great role in the development of this religion. Although by certain irony, the Jewish people in majority did not sort of accept the Christianity, and still are practicing Judaism in the form which was developed before Jesus Christ. So, but this is I don't think that it is very important question now. We'll maybe speak about this problem later, when we'll speak about Benedict Spinoza, who was one of the ideologists and philosophers of the 17th century, who was a Jew by birth. Now, we only need to stress that somehow Christianity influenced important thinkers of Europe of the first and even the beginning of the second millennium. And among them, there was a Ammonius Saccas. I will write in chat. Um, a, a, a scientist, a philosopher from Ammonius Saccas. Well, I think this name is not to be remembered. He was the founder, Ammonius. Yes, I wrote it not correctly. Ammonius, this double M, Saccas. Well, my Sakos. I sometimes make mistakes. During my previous lecture, I mixed up several times Cicero and Socrates just because of the inertia of the brain. So there were two images of Socrates and Cicero, and so I just, due to some errors within my brain, I think the neurons are working not properly, associations. Sometimes it happens with your brain, especially when you are 63 years old. So the brain becomes sort of, well, needs repair work, but still it is not possible to upgrade your brain. Well, maybe in later years it will be possible, but now still it's not so easy. So we'll just try to work with our brains as they are. Okay. So this Ammonius Saccos was a philosopher from Alexandria. Alexandria was a city in Egypt founded by Alexander of Macedon, who well, played a great role in the dissemination or expanding Greek culture throughout habitable earth, or just in well, at first, we spoke that uh, Greek culture was mainly influential in the Mediterranean basin, but due to the military efforts of Alexander of Macedon, it sort of expanded even to the borders of India. This country, the kingdom of Bactria, which on the territory of modern Afghanistan, which played a great role there in the cultural connections between India and Greek Roman civilization, and also to Egypt. So Egypt became Hellenized, sort of, you understand, Hellenized. So uh, yes, Egypt. And so in Egypt, there was built quite a new city in the year 330 before Christ, BC. So it was called Alexandria. Alexandria. Still, it exists to this day. So if there are some students from Egypt, they can confirm it independently. So in this city of Alexandria, there were a lot of Jewish population and a lot of also Greek population. But and of course the Egyptians were also present there with their Coptic language. So this was a like a milieu or environment in which there were three languages spoken: Coptic language, which is like a variant of Egyptian language, and also Greek language and Hebrew. But the Jews in Alexandria, they soon forgot their Hebrew and they spoke Greek. So there was made a Greek translation of the Old Testament from Hebrew into Greek. So it was made in Alexandria somewhere uh, um, in the first or second century before Christ. So, of course, when Christianity appeared, it influenced some minds of people living in Alexandria. Especially, we can mention Origen, who was one of the first Christian ideologists who was living in the 3rd century. But also it influenced this Ammonius Saccos, who was the founder of Neoplatonism. There are two different versions of the relations of Ammonius Saccos with Christianity. According to one version, which was developed by Neoplatonists themselves, namely by Porphyry, he at first was a Christian, and then he became a Neoplatonist, or like a heathen. He abjured or sort of apostatized from Christianity in favor of his new philosophy. Well, according to other sources, mostly Christian, this is not so. They maintain that Ammonius Saccas was a Christian throughout his life, being at the same time a philosopher. Well, we don't know what is exactly the truth of it, because you know, this the problem of sources, the problem of interpretation or hermeneutics. Well, it's not so important for us now. Only the influence of Christianity is there. Whether it was more or less profound, it doesn't play a great role. So Ammonius Saccas founded a new philosophy, which is called Neoplatonism, which influenced much. Why it is important, first of all, as an intermediate step between, say, ancient philosophy and medieval philosophy, but also it played a great role in the epoch which we called Renaissance period. At that time, there was a resurged influence or interest to Neoplatonism. Well, what is that, Neoplatonism? We spoke a lot about Plato, and I think it was interesting, and I received already a few essays, and one of them was devoted to Plato. So this means that Plato continues to influence even modern people. So what is Neoplatonism then? It is a kind of a development of Platonic ideas in the 3rd century AD, or Christian era, 3rd century. Um, mm, this the time when Ammonius Saccas was born. So you see, 3rd century AD. So a lot of time has passed since the death of Plato, approximately 700 or 800 years. So this is unexpected new interest and new sort of momentum which this philosophy has received due to this Ammonius Saccas, and I think partly thanks to Christianity, because Christianity introduced some new ideas, especially the idea of God the Creator, and the idea of so-called Logos, or the second person of the Trinity, and also the idea of the Trinity itself. So somehow it influenced Neoplatonic philosophy, and we'll see in which way. First of all, the Neoplatonists start with the so-called one, or in Greek it is hen, or one. This is the word for one in Greek, n. Well, sometimes it is written n, but because of the pronunciation, it's pronounced as also as hen, which looks like a bird in English. But so this is n, which means one. So this principle is neuter. It is neither masculine nor feminine, and it cannot be sort of expressed in some categories. So we can only say that it exists. It's not like pure being. Then by means of emanation, from this principle follows another principle, which is called nous in Greek, or mind in like with a capital letter. So this mind is like the source of all future minds, especially including our minds. So our thinking, according to Neoplatonists, is possible if we partake or participate in this mind with a capital letter, which emanates from one. Mind is, according to Greek language, nous is masculine. So this means that there appears gender, and namely masculine gender. But then out of mind proceeds, emanates psyche, which is in Greek soul, world soul, we can say, because it is not concrete your or my soul, but it's like soul in general, or world soul. Well, this sounds quite mystical, but here we are. We cannot just take no consideration of Neoplatonism. Even Hegel, in his History of Philosophy, although he was very much put the great stress on ancient philosophy, but at the same time he just devoted some pages of his History of Philosophy also to Neoplatonism. Well, in the Soviet period, of course, there was not much spoken about that period because Neoplatonists are like you see idealists, and in the period when materialist philosophy was ruling, idealism was sort of had to keep a low profile. Okay, psyche, world soul. This is the third principle, and psyche is feminine. So we have now feminine gender, and out of psyche emanates plurality, or plurality of spirits, or plurality of souls. So this means that from one soul, world soul, it is divided into many souls, and this is also kind of a degradation. Well, because this is a lack of unity. Unity is lost somehow, and that's why with the emanation leads to degradation. A certain so it is like anti-Darwinian perspective. With Darwin, we have progressive evolution. With Neoplatonists, we have a regressive evolution or degradation. So uh, we have now many souls. And the last point of degradation is matter. Well, you remember how negatively esteemed Plato matter. So matter is the prison of the spirit, body is the prison of the soul, life is a disease. You remember. So now you can sort of recognize these Platonic ideas in Neoplatonism. So matter is the last like step in this degradation. And then man is formed out of body, material body, and immaterial soul. And what now is left for man? What is the aim of his life according to Neoplatonists? According to Neoplatonists, the aim of his life is to uh, return to one, to this principle of unity. Sort of first step is that he should understand that soul is much more noble than the body. So he should practice asceticism or other virtues. Then he should somehow communicate with the world soul. So leave away, like in Buddhism, his concept of ego, his egoism, you understand, his concept of person. So this idea of me and myself, like they call it the unholy trinity, I, me, and myself. Okay, so that's from this sort of concentration on yourself, on your particular soul or particular person, you should sort of unite yourself with this world soul. This is will be a step forward, and then you should come to this mind. So you just follow this way backwards. Okay, so if the emanation started from one, but your sort of pro-odus or your progress should start from matter to emanation. Well, emanare. Well, I think there is a word emanate also in English. The verb to emanate. This is the verb to emanate. It means to proceed. Well, to proceed. So this is like a process. Okay. So And now we have to sort of move backwards uh, from matter, or from our union of soul and body, to this concept of one, to this principle of one. And when we reach this principle of one, this is called ecstasy. Well, I think like that, ecstasy. So, well, now the word ecstasy is used quite in a different sense, but ecstasy, yes, I think negative evolution, because positive evolution or progressive evolution means that matter develops into spirit, and here spirit degrades into matter. Okay, so um, idealism of Neoplatonists sort of shows itself in their like in the fact that they start from immaterial principles, and matter appears on the last step of so-called evolution or emanation, you see. So this is quite opposite to what we are sort of accustomed to. I mean, starting with Darwin or Feuerbach or say Karl Marx, we are accustomed to regard matter as the first principle, and from matter sort of emanates or proceeds or evolves spirit. And this spirit is, of course, concrete spirit, our spirit, spirit of a concrete person. And then by certain communication, when the language is born, so from these concrete persons forms what we called world community. So what we are having now with Anna Katsova and Dmitry Kryukov and others, and Marina Teplякova. So we are somehow united in doing the same thing or exchanging ideas. Sometimes it is painful because my ideas do not correspond to your ideas, my emotions do not correspond to your emotions, but somehow we manage with education, culture, gentlemanly behavior, empathy, we manage somehow to unite ourselves in this like community of intelligent persons. So they later will develop a concept, a scientific community, because of course to practice science individually is now, I think, scarcely possible. So this is how we regard it. So we start from matter, then there's individual consciousness, then there's plurality, a so-called world soul, and then we come to nous, which means scientific achievements. So, or the what Karl Popper calls world three, or the world of human ideas already stored in the libraries or in textbooks and so on. Well, I mean, yes, the majority. Of course, there are some Christians, individual Christians, maybe, well, like the last of the Mohicans, you know. But the mainstream, of course, is materialistic, both in Russia and in the West. So, well, Christianity is a little bit fading away, maybe not with such speed as was sort of prognosticated by Karl Marx, Feuerbach, and Lenin, but still, of course, it is on the like well, a little bit marginalized. I mean, in the upper classes, maybe and in European American civilization, maybe in some countries like the Philippines, it is more, or Latin America, it's more has more ground sort of in population and in even in the government. Well, now in Russia there are some attempts to reintroduce Christianity, but they, well, the success is like well, we'll speak about that later when we'll come to the Middle Ages, like flourishing Middle Ages, where Christianity, of course, will like play the upper hand. Okay, but now we are only in the beginning, and um, the Neoplatonists. It is interesting. There, well, I mentioned on three names. Well, maybe four. Plotinus, um, Porphyr, I'm sorry. Oh, this is, I made a mistake. Plotinus. This is, and you cannot uh, edit in chat your Plotinus. Okay. Porphyry, we already mentioned him, and Proclus. Uh, well, Proclus. I think it's like that. And also Iamblichus. Well, somebody already mentioned Iamblichus in his essays. He wrote the life of Pythagoras. So, but Iamblichus is not a very important Neoplatonist. Of course, there were others. Well, yes, I think, yes, thank you very much, Kumar. I think this historians of philosophy speak about Neoplatonist Trinity. So they means one is like God the Father, nous is like Logos or God the Son, and world soul plays the role of the Holy Spirit. Okay, so there's a like a Trinity, and then from this Trinity comes or emanates like the first man, and but you know this concept of first man is like a little bit obscured in Neoplatonism, because they just prefer to speak about plurality. So the creation of Adam and Eve is like regarded not as something joyful, but a kind of a degradation. Okay, so individuals should be regarded as just imperfect in themselves, imperfect as if in their quality of individuals. So to be an individuum is something bad according to Neoplatonist philosophy. Well, and here appears a kind of a tension between Christians and Neoplatonists, which led to, I think, open hostility sometimes, especially when an emperor, Julian the Apostate, he was called the Apostate, uh, Julian the Apostate, um, became an emperor of the Roman Empire in the 4th century. He was he was, I think, the grandson of Constantine, who already embraced Christianity. So Julian the Apostate decided to return to heathen religion and to Neoplatonism, and he was surrounded by Neoplatonist philosophers, and that created tensions between Christianity and Neoplatonism. And well, the reign of Julian the Apostate was brief, and after him, the further emperors were Christians. But still, there was this episode was not forgotten, and it eventually led to the closing of the Athenian Academy in uh, 529. The Athenian Academy was closed by Emperor Justinian, the same emperor who built Hagia Sophia, or the Cathedral of Saint Sophia in Istanbul. Um, uh, Athenian Academy. So academy founded by Plato in Athens was somehow existed for 1,000 years and then was closed. It reappeared only during the Renaissance in the 15th century. So for 1,000 years, so there was like a break of a tradition, Platonic tradition. So why was this were these tensions between Christianity and Neoplatonism, although Christianity influenced somehow the birth of Neoplatonism? I mean, with Ammonius Saccas and perhaps even with Origen, who was considered to be one of the pupils of Ammonius Saccas. So in the third century, in the beginning of Neoplatonism, there were relations were more or less friendly, but then they became more and more tense and like belligerent. Or, well, this is why, because for Christians, a principle of matter is not bad in itself, because there's a concept of incarnation, so that Logos or God the Son received human flesh, incarnation, became man, incarnation. So if you are indoctrinated in Christianity, you should understand that incarnation is very important for Christian belief. It's one of the major dogmas or articles of faith for both Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox Christians. So incarnation, and that means that flesh, uh, carnis is flesh, caro is flesh, caro carnis genitive case, caro is in Latin is flesh. So incarnation is taking of flesh, so matter. Uh, Yes, the difference is this concept of emanation, because in Platonism it is not sort of stressed very much how Plato didn't sort of say how the plurality of souls appear. So there were only first steps being made there in Plato's philosophy. So I think without this influence of monotheism, Neoplatonism couldn't have evolved out of Platonism. So the difference is the influence of Christianity and Judaism in the form of Christianity. Okay, so this is the influence of, like I would say, Middle East tradition or Semitic tradition. So when there's synthesis of several cultures take place, usually it leads to a certain progress in philosophy. And I think that the Semitic influence, or the, we can say, Jewish influence, was positive, and it appeared in several ways. And first of all, in the existence of Judaism itself, which is it played a certain restricted role in the first millennium, but in the second millennium, especially starting from Spinoza and later we have Jewish thinkers mostly in the 20th century. I mean Jewish by nationality, by birth, but they are more or less secular, but still we can speak about Jewish influence in the 19th century and especially in the 20th century. So somehow we have to understand that there are according to Hegel, it's all very simple. There is the German spirit and there is the Aryan spirit, as he says, Hegel, and there is a Jewish spirit. Okay, well, for Hegel was a little bit, I would say, anti-Semitic, and he regarded this Jewish influence mostly negative. But well, we can sort of, we are not obliged to follow Hegel blindly. So I prefer to speak about Semitic or Jewish influence in positive terms. Well, I think that every influence, it's like in biology outbreeding. Okay, so it brings new genetic information. Okay, so these influences of different cultures are beneficial usually, and this synthesis is usually beneficial. This is my point of view. Maybe Hegel wouldn't disagree, but I don't mind now. Well, so you can have your own opinion. Of course, I don't insist that you should have my opinion about this positive influence of Jewish religion and Jewish influence, I'm sorry, Jewish sort of culture on European thought, that it really enriched and not spoiled the Greek-Roman heritage. So Neoplatonism is just one example. Now, Christianity is another example. And there was a certain synthesis of Christianity and Neoplatonism, and we find it at first of all in St. Augustine. Well, St. Augustine, of course, he was a theologian, so his like contribution to science is minimal. Augustine. Well, St. Augustine. And his contribution to science is minimal, but his contribution to philosophy is great. And he influenced, for example, Wittgenstein, his philosophical investigations. Wittgenstein is very important philosopher of science of the 20th century. And if you take his philosophical investigations, then you will find citations from St. Augustine. So philosophical, this when he speaks about so-called language games, philosophical investigations. This will come discussed later, but still you see that the influence of Augustine investigations. Okay, so I've proved to you that Augustine is important because he's cited by Wittgenstein. This is enough, okay? I can speak about Augustine for a whole hour, but this will lead us nowhere now. I prefer to switch to Boethius and show you the first slide, the philosophy of Albert Dürer. I will explain why they are connected. Boethius is a philosopher, a Roman philosopher, or he lived in Ravenna mostly, but in Rome also. He died in 526 because he was accused by the Ostgothic emperor of treason, that he conspired with the Byzantine Empire, with Justinian. So he was executed, and first of all, he was put to prison. And when in prison, he had this vision of philosophy, which appeared to him and sort of, helped him. And this is called Consolation of Philosophy. He wrote a poem, and also partly a poem, partly a book of prose, which is called Consolation of Philosophy. Consolation. So philosophy can console, okay? This is interesting. Very positive, I think, idea for me, for example, as a philosopher. Consolation of philosophy. So now we can see the first slide, and maybe also a slide which depicts the taking of Rome by Ostgoths. There is a picture. You remember, Marina, I've sent you a picture where the sacking of Rome by the Visigoths, or I don't know, Ostgoths also.
Sorry, this I don't have.
Well, just imagine it, because it is everywhere. But do you have this Dürer philosophy?
Yes.
Yes, then you can show us. So this is important because It is depicted by Albert Dürer under the influence of Boëtius and his Consolation of Philosophy. Yes, so you see, says the woman sitting on the throne, and here are you see 7 on her mantle. From her mantle, there's a certain well, I would say, I forgot what is in English for lenta. Well, maybe it's not lenta.
Ribbon. Ribbon.
Well, yes, you see there's a letter theta starting, which is from this word starts theory. So this, well, it appeared to Boëthius with 2 letters, theory and practice. Well, but here we have theta is theory, and in the lowest letter is phi, which is from which starts philosophy, and in the middle there are the names of the 7 liberal arts, which are first grammar, then it's rhetorics, and then it's logic or dialectics, then it's astronomy, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. So there are 7 liberal arts. Well, I'm not sure that all of them are mentioned there, but some of them are seen there as in abbreviations. Astronomy for, well, but well, this is difficult for me to interpret, but well, also you can see the like medallions on the 4 sides. The upper one is Philosophia Graecorum Egyptiorum Sacerdotes et Chaldei, and the central figure is Ptolemy, the famous astronomer. It's on the upper side. Then we see Philosophy Graecorum, and here is Plato. It's, yes, to the right, Plato. Then we see Philosophy Latinorum, and here is Cicero and Virgilius, so both of them. So this, well, Virgilius is not exactly a philosopher, it's more of a poet, but very famous also. Well, you see, philosophy is used like every mental activity, so poets are also included among the philosophers. If you read, I hope you read some of Bertrand Russell, History of Western Philosophy. So you can find there a chapter about Byron. So Byron, being a poet, received a special attention from Bertrand Russell, and he even named one of the chapters of his book, History of Western Philosophy, named, well, just devoted it to Byron, the poet. So here is Virgilius, okay? And Poeta, Latinorum Poeta and Rhetorics. So, well, they're also regarded as a source of philosophy. And then to the left is Sapientes Germanorum. And here is Albert the Great. So there's a medieval figure. So you see the development, and also here the inscriptions show us that this program, that Sophiam Graeci vocant Latini sapientiam, so means that Greeks call me Sophia, Latins call me sapientia, with wisdom. I was started by Egyptians and Chaldees, then I was I was not invented by Egyptians and Chaldees. Then Greeks and continued with me, and Latins translated me into Latin language, and the Germans amplified me, so made me greater. Yes, engravings to Dante, I'm not sure. Well, you can, there were a lot of engravings by Albert Dürer, so he was very productive painter, and also I think with a touch of philosophy. So you can, here you can see like some concept also of development of science, of philosophy. So, but here you can, why did I choose this particular engraving? Because it is a good illustration to our lecture, the lecture which focuses on transition of Greek-Roman culture from ancient world to Renaissance via or through the Middle Ages. So this is important how it survived. Okay, so I think now it's enough. We'll make a short break for 5 minutes, and we'll resume with other. We have some other subjects to continue with. So I ask you now for 5 minutes of rest. Okay, and you can also have a rest. 45 minutes have passed, so now we can have a little rest, okay? For 5 minutes. Marina, it's good? Good idea.
It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's continue. I've forgotten to say, and perhaps you can also accuse me of being not logical, because I didn't mention that both Boethius and Augustine were under the great influence of Neoplatonism. So here we have a synthesis of Neoplatonism and Christianity. In spite of this episode of Julian the Apostate and the enmity between Neoplatonists and the Christians. So Neoplatonism, in fact, influenced Christianity, and Augustine even they say that Augustine cited Plotinus shortly before his death. And I think there are also many other cases of influence, examples of influence of Neoplatonic philosophy on Augustine. And I think volumes have been written about it in scholarly humanitarian literature and articles and monographs. This Neoplatonism and Augustine, just you Google it and you will see a lot of literature on that subject. Boethius, he even translated the commentaries of Porphyry to the categories of Aristotle. So he translated the work of one of the major Neoplatonist philosophers from Greek into Latin. So I think it's enough. But I think the influences of Neoplatonism on Boethius are enormous, and especially this appearance of philosophy as a woman. Maybe this is an allegory to the world soul, okay, the so-called Sophia, or female principle of the world, okay. So it's not found in Christianity, although Sophia and Sapientia, both in Greek and in Latin, are feminine words, but they denote Jesus Christ, who is certainly male. So here is, but the world soul as a just certain principle, like independent principle, is feminine, and so with the trinity of Neoplatonists, feminine principle plays, I would say, a greater role than with Christianity, Christian trinity. So, well, and this appearance of philosophy in like as a woman in image of a woman is also very important. I think also for those of my auditory who are women themselves, okay? There's a kind of a glorification of a woman, okay? By Dürer also, of course. So now we'll speak about another subject. Please, Marina, can you show us the Swerve, the book written about the destiny of Lucretius' manuscript in the Middle Ages? It's called the Swerve.
Just a second.
Well, the swerve is a technical word which means which means klinamen or kleinamen, as they pronounce it in English. You remember we spoke about klinamen when we spoke about Epicurus, and I think it was the most interesting part of my lecture, if I can appreciate it myself, because I think there was some interest in among the auditory to this concept of Epicurus, and especially when I spoke about Lucretius and his poem De Rerum Natura, or On the Nature of Things. So Lucretius was very much influenced by Epicurus and sort of also translated, you remember, with Dürer. So the role of the Latins is mostly in translation of Greek philosophy into another language, into Latin language, and introducing it into Latin culture. So exactly that was what Lucretius did with Epicurean philosophy. He translated it, or yes, Swerve is Kleinamen, as the English say, but I prefer to pronounce it as in Latin, they are pronounced Klinamen. But swerve, you understand, it's a technical word for that. So Stefan Greenblatt, also perhaps Jewish author and an example of the Jewish influence on philosophy now of the 21st century, because it's quite a new novel, describes a very interesting episode how this poem of Lucretius, containing, according to Greenblatt, some very modern ideas about how the world was generated, and how it was preserved during these dark ages or Middle Ages, in spite of the fact that their attitude towards Lucretius was very negative. Well, Marina, I've sent you a link to a certain book, scholarly book about Lucretius and Jerome, and a negative appreciation. Have you received this letter? It is in your mailbox.
Okay, let me look for it, and if I find it, I'll show it.
Yes,
okay?
yes. If you find it, just it's. I've sent it. I think before the lecture, maybe 15 minutes before the lecture started. So it is one of your newest. If you have different mailboxes, I send it to the mailbox through which we always, as usual, communicate. So you can just look at it. There is the link to this very important text, where you can see how a great authority of Christianity, Saint Jerome, who translated the Bible from, oh yes, here, you see.
So what should I show?
Show us the first, the page 44 to the end, especially the what is written in italics, the commentary, because here is, yes, here in the end, in the bottom of the page is the most important phrase. I will read it to you. the poet Titus Lucretius is born. This is how Jerome characterizes Lucretius in Chronicon. Later, having become insane by drinking a love potion, after writing during period of remission several books, which Cicero later edited, he committed suicide at the age of 44. So this is Jerome is a translator of the Bible in Latin, the author of so-called Vulgata. Vulgata is a Latin translation of the Bible, very popular throughout the Middle Ages and even now with the traditional Catholics. So Vulgata, okay? Latin translation of the Bible. So Jerome lived in, he was even, I think, in friend relations with St. Augustine, so it is the beginning of the 5th century. He is a very important figure and one of the 4 Latin fathers, fathers of the church, okay? So he knew about Lactantius, I'm sorry, Lucretius, and about his poem, but of course he was very negatively sort of evaluated this poem, and he even tried to denigrate the author himself, saying that he was insane, that he was drinking love potions, which is called philtra, also in Greek, philtra, love potions, or philtron. This is a love potion. It's like aphrodisiac, which was made out of, I think, like, black pepper or some or honey, or just there were many in. Well, you understand what is love potion? Philtra, philtron. In Greek, philtron, or no, it's real liquid. If you drink it, you have this is aphrodisiac. This is like an effect of this love potion is that your libido is strengthened. Okay, well, too much, I think, information, and maybe not very chaste, but well. Life is life, okay? So we'll speak about Sigmund Freud, also the role of libido in life of man. Well, of course, Popper will criticize Freudism for its unscientific character because it cannot be falsified, but still, this was the discussion we had with Marina when she passed her exam in philosophy, if you remember. We spoke about Freud and Popper and his evaluation of Freudism. This is this is a detail. Ambra, yes. Well, there were many components in this philtron, this love potion, and it was very popular among so-called intelligentsia. Maybe also Lucretius also tasted it, like Michel Foucault tasted LSD, the drug, famous drug. So there's also Jean-Paul Sartre also tasted some drugs like mescaline, or well, you know, there's a whole history can be written, drugs and philosophy. Okay. I'm not personally not a drug addict and do not use love potions or energizers, but still you can understand that this is part of culture. But according to Christianity, it is negative. So people who sort of use love potions, they were considered sinners, okay? And also negative is that he committed suicide. Also for Christianity and for Judaism also, and I think for every monotheistic religion, including Islam, committing suicide is a sin, is not a good behavior. So there's a lot of negative information about Lucretius. So now Greenblatt in his novel, The Swerve, or his book, The Swerve, asks a question: how could such a poem full of I would say, anti-religious ideas, materialistic ideas, Epicurean ideas, be preserved in Christian monasteries, because there was no other way. It was found eventually in one of the Christian monasteries. I think it is St. Gallen. Well, according to one hypothesis, it's St. Gallen. According to others, is Fulda. But the date is quite precise. It is 1417, and the inventor name we also know. It's Poggio Bracciolini. Bracciolini, Italian humanist. So Poggio Bracciolini attended the Council of Constance, the church council, and he had some free time, and he visited nearby monasteries, especially St. Gallen, which is not far from Constance, and it is also on the banks near this Bodensee, or Constance Lake. So I will ask Marina if you have this slide with a boat, St. Gall and St. Columban, just like sitting in a boat. Yes, this is Lake Constance, or Bodensee. You see, it's well, some of you may be been to Switzerland. A lot of my former students from Moscow Physical Technical Institute are now in Switzerland. So for them, it's just normal picture, this Bodensee, or Lake Constance. And here we have the founder of this monastery, St. Gallen, or St. Gall monastery, and now it is a city in Switzerland called St. Gallen, in the German canton of Switzerland. So St. Gallen, it's just well, it started as a first it was built a monastery, which was built by St. Gall, the disciple of the Irish, or the follower of the Irish missionary Columbanus. So here we see how it all started. It is Columbanus lived in the 6th century. So it all started somewhere in the 6th or 7th century. So, what is monastery, typical Christian monastery? It had a so-called library and also scriptorium. Scriptorium means a place or a room where monks copied manuscripts. So the majority of the manuscripts, also the manuscript of Lucretius' poem, were kept in monastic libraries, but they were kept in a, like as Poggio Bracciolini described it in a letter to his friend, it was kept somewhere in the dark corner. There was a lot of dust there, so nobody read, of course, this poem of Lucretius. So monks didn't read it, didn't use it. So it was, but somehow it was kept there in the library. And because Poggio Bracciolini was a secretary of the Pope and a member, how to say, a participant of the Church Council, although he was a layperson, he was not a priest, he was allowed to look at these manuscripts. And when he found this poem, of course, his eyes became very, very big, you understand. So he understood that he found a treasure. So he immediately asked the monks to copy it anew, and he sent this new copy to his friends in Italy, and eventually it was published when the printing press appeared later. It was published in Italy. And before it was published, it was widely known among the Italian humanists and cited by many people, okay? So this was a renewal. This by we call the whole epoch Renaissance. But what we see now is the role of the Middle Ages in keeping or preserving these manuscripts, this tradition. So of course, it was not cited in, say, during the Middle Ages. So you cannot find citations from Lucretius in Thomas Aquinas or Albert the Great or other important figures of the Middle Ages, but still it's there. Okay. Now we can speak a few words about the first original medieval philosopher of the 9th century. Marina, please, yes, return to the, I want to use the chat. So this is the book, which is called in Latin De Divisione Naturae, and on the in English it can be translated on the division of nature. So this book is written by an Irish scholar, John Scott Riugena. Well, from his name, you can also see that he is from Ireland, because Eire is a name of Ireland in Gaelic language, Riugena. And Gena is born there, so genus, as generation, you understand. So, so John Scott Riugena means born in Ireland. Well, Scott, well, can be understood that he is Scottish, but you know, at that time Scots were called both Irish and Scots. So this was not typical for Scottish people. So it doesn't contradict that he was born in Ireland. Well, he lived in the 9th century when there was already a flourishing empire of Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, the emperor of France, Charles the Great, or it's called in French Charlemagne, Carolus Magnus. Well, this was an emperor who reigned not from Paris, because at that time the capital was in Aachen, modern Germany. It's a city of Aachen, sometimes spelled with 2 A's at the beginning, like this one. Well, this is the same. So this was the capital of the so-called Western Roman Empire, like reintroduced because the First Roman Empire fell by the in the war with Ostgoths. So now it was reintroduced because Franks were received Christianity, the English also, the Germans also. So there was a like Christianization of Europe done by such people as St. Columban, the missionaries. Also, St. Columban is from Ireland. So Ireland was like a source of Christianity for Europe, and sort of gave many Christian missionaries who spread Christianity in Europe, especially in Germany and in Switzerland. Now, by the 9th century, when John Scott Riugena lived, already Christianity was very strongly established in Europe with Charles the Great and his Western Roman Empire. And Charles the Great decided to surround himself with scholars. So he, because he envied the Byzantine emperors Byzantine emperors were considered to be very much educated, and he himself was quite illiterate, but he understood the significance of learning. So he wanted to surround himself with learned people. So John Scotti Eugeno was one of them. First of all, he started with the translation of a so-called this author who was called Dionysius, the Areopagite. Well, what is that? It is interesting. It is a obscure Greek author who was associated with the first bishop of Paris, Dionysius. Okay, so in Paris there was built the Abbey Saint-Denis, which was the birthplace of Gothic style. You see, so there I have some illustrations of Gothic style and painted glasses from this Saint-Denis Abbey. If Marina can find them, that will be, I think, very interesting for you. You see, here is the Saint-Denis Abbey, and here is the painted glass. Two animals, a lion, which is not at all scary, and the lamb, both opening a book sealed by the 7 seals. This is an illustration from the Apocalypse. Well, but and also there's another example of Gothic style, very interesting. Maybe I've sent it to you. This is the Gothic cathedral in in Famagusta, Cyprus, which is now a mosque. So after the Turks took Cyprus, they didn't demolish the cathedral built by the Crusaders, but they turned it into a mosque. So you see the minarets there. So this is a combination of Muslim style and Christian style, okay, Gothic style. So these are all examples and also Cathedral of St. Nicholas. Well, it is called so. You see, so until 1571, it was a Catholic cathedral, and now it is Mustafa Pasha Mosque, Famagusta. This is the part of Cyprus which is occupied by the Turkish forces. So Cyprus as a isle is divided into 2 parts. Okay, so if you want to visit Famagusta, it will not be very easy because this territory is not recognized by the United Nations. I mean, this state of this part of Cyprus. Well, I'm not sure if it is possible to visit this part of Cyprus, but who knows? Maybe you will come and visit it eventually. So here is the Gothic was born. Now we'll return to Saint Dionysius. Marina, I will return to my chat. Yes. So you have Turkish visa. Oh, who knows? So we return to Dionysius the Areopagite. So this author who wrote in Greek is somehow associated with Dionysius, the first bishop of Paris, and the companion of Apostle Paul. That's why Charles the Great was interested into translating this book, the books of Dionysius. There were several of them, from Greek into Latin. And so John Scotti Eugeno was given this commission to translate these books. After he translated them, he wrote his own book on the division of nature. And this is a first original contribution of Western man, Irishman, to world philosophy. So there are some interesting new ideas, which we'll discuss after a short break, okay? Okay, let's continue. So we started to speak about this work on the division of nature. So what is this division? There are four kinds of nature. One nature is the nature which creates, which creates, but is not created, but is not itself created. Well, in Latin, it's easier to, it's natura creans et non creata, but is not, so Latin is more compact language. But we'll do it in English. It's self-created. So this is God, the nature which, divine nature, the nature which creates, but is not itself created. The second nature is the nature which creates and is created. Creates and is created. Is created. Is itself and is created. So this is, well, we can say man. Man is created. He didn't create himself. He is the offspring of his parents. We cannot speak about, say, Ivan Lupandin before 1957. There existed no such man as, and when even I started to exist, I couldn't deliver lectures immediately from my cradle, okay? So there should I should learn to speak, to read and write, to also have some skills and, okay. With possible without problem, very good. Free of charge, very good, thank you. So this is good, good news. We'll speak about Gothic a few moments later. So now we are, we will not leave this theme just without reflecting on the influence of Gothic, on Gothic style also, and Gothic mentality on even contemporary man. Especially there's a subculture, youth subculture of Goths. Okay, thank you, Behnam. And now the nature which creates and is created. Well, we can say human nature, an example, but also every living nature somehow partakes in this creation, because a seed create a plant if it is thrown into the earth, okay? So all the world is imbued with so-called logoi, or just seminal principles, okay? Now, there is the nature also, the third one, the nature which is created and does not create. Nature which is created, which is created and does not create, does not itself create, and does not create, does not create. These are inanimate. This is the example are samples of inanimate nature, like minerals, for example. They are created, but so mineral nature, it doesn't create, but it is created. Now comes the fourth part of this, like logical logical square. So you can guess already. So we'll come to the nature which is not created and does not create. So the most mysterious part of it, the nature which is not created and does not create. So all the possibilities are now sort of included, okay, or sort of reached, well, exhausted, exhausted. Yes, all the possibilities are now exhausted. So the nature that is not created and does not create. Well, what is that? This is the most mysterious part of it. This is original, something original which didn't exist before John Scott Eriugena started to write this treatise. And does not create. So this nature has something of a mixture of say a divine nature and a mineral nature. The divine is that it is not created. This is divine in it. And that is doesn't create, it looks like a mineral that doesn't create. So what is this combination between mineral nature and divine nature? This is God himself in the state of rest. So this is the sabbatical. God takes the sabbatical. So he ceases to create. He says, well, I've created everything, now I need a rest. This rest in God is a very important concept. It will be, it is already present in Epicurus philosophy, Epicurean philosophy. Remember that God are blessed. They do not answer our prayers because they are at rest. They want to rest, have a rest. And if we sort of attack them with our prayers, we sort of try to get them out of their rest and influence them and sort of get them start to work again. Okay, a long rest, yes, of the nature of the square, a logical square. Yes, you know, a logical square where that the four possibilities. This is a square. This is a, I think, if you know, had lessons in logic, mathematical logic, so there are four possibilities. Say, like four elements of Aristotle. Remember, they are built out of two opposites, two pairs of opposites. Okay, so wet and dry, cold and wet and dry, cold and hot. So there are four possibilities: hot and, say, hot and dry, wet and wet and cold. So you see that here's the same. So nature created and not created. So so there's a creation and non-creation. So and to partake in to be creative and to be not creative. So there are also two pairs of opposites somehow. So first member is, or first element is the nature that creates and is not created. Then the nature that creates and is created, and so on. So this is a logical square. Okay. Yes. Now I will again move to Neoplatonists. So non-existence, well, I think matter is non-existence according to Neoplatonists. So matter is minimum of existence. With Plato, it is like synonym of non-existence. So matter is sort of doesn't exist. Well, in here, mineral nature is the so-called the lowest nature because it is created and does not create. Okay, so it's the lowest one. The better is say man, who although he's created but he can create himself. Okay, and the best is God, which creates and is not created, but even higher than God the creator is God that rests, that does not create. It is like the one of Neoplatonists. It is even cannot be explained in categories. Things made out of minerals. Well, this is the same when we spoke about uh, matter and form. Okay, so actions of a robot. Well, this is an example of, I think, human creation, because we created robots out of nothing. And what is not created and doesn't create? This is the Neoplatonist one, because Neoplatonist one is cannot be expressed in some positive terms or categories. Okay, so this is something mysterious. So this apophatic, apophatic. Well, this concept of apophatic, which is not possible to be expressed in words, apophatic. This comes from the same Dionysius the Areopagite, and from him also comes the idea of well, yes, of course, one is God, but one seems there's a difference between creation and emanation. Okay, so there's a certain like I said, subtleties here. Well, now I will just also point out, divert your attention to another thing, that with Dionysius the Areopagite, we have an example of spiritual progress. So it starts, has three stages: spiritual progress, or like return to one, spiritual progress. So man finds himself in a very bad situation, because the situation of plurality and conjunction with matter. So spiritual progress is needed in order to come out of this very poor situation in which we are now. So this spiritual progress has three stages. It starts from first, purification. Then the second is illumination by light, illumination. After purification follows illumination. And the third is perfection. This is the third stage, which can be compared with the ecstasy of Neoplatonists. So in order to reach perfection, we should start with purification. What does it mean, purification? It's just to subdue or mortify our flesh, our body. This is purification. Then comes illumination. This is the culture of your intellect. So your intellect should be illuminated. This is possible only after you have completed the first stage of purification. Yes, two nature or one God, yes. This is a typically Christian idea. One God has two natures. I mean, Jesus has a human nature and divine nature. This is not Neoplatonist idea, of course. That was created a scandal and division between Neoplatonists and Christians. But here, but nevertheless, Neoplatonic influence was present, especially in this Dionysius the Areopagite. He was definitely influenced by Neoplatonist ideas, and the first was the idea of hierarchy, because many of his works are called celestial hierarchy, or ecclesiastical hierarchy. So hierarchy is like a ladder which leads from bottom to top and from top to bottom. Okay, hierarchy. So in Neoplatonists we have this hierarchy. So it starts from one, then a lower step is mind. Still lower step is world soul. Still lower steps is plurality of souls, and still lower step is matter. So if we want to climb this ladder, we should also understand this hierarchical principle. Okay, so then there's also a hierarchy in spiritual progress. So first step is purification, second step is illumination, and third step is perfection. Now we can also, about God's creation of human stupidity. Well, I've already cited you Lucretius, who said that God is better the creation of human fear, because man fears many things, and that's how prayer is born. So man wants to be protected. We'll speak about that when we come to Sigmund Freud and his idea of how religion is born, from the image of the father in a little child. Helpless little child imagines the omnipotent or almighty father. So he sort of, out of the human father, the concept of a human father, is born the concept of a superhuman father, okay, or God, who is who can answer all your prayers. Well, so let's return to the perfection of the spiritual progress. Perfection is unity. So perfection is when we unite ourselves with God, or with one, Neoplatonist. So, but this progress should start with purification or negation of matter in yourself. So the victory of spirit over matter. Then when spirit is victorious, it can be illuminated by ideas which come from the mind. So you see here is nominally Dionysius the Areopagite is a Christian author. He's not a heretic, but he is very much influenced by Neoplatonist ideas. So here is a synthesis of two philosophies or two creeds, Neoplatonic and Christian. And from this also synthesis comes Gothic, because Gothic starts with the Abbey of Saint Denis, devoted to Saint Dionysius, and also there is an idea of light which illuminates the man, and so out of light there comes the idea of a stained glass, from which light comes and sort of illuminates the cathedral. Okay, stained glasses, well, or vitraux in French, and vitrum in Latin, or in Russian vitrages. Okay, so this is come from vitrum, which means glass in Latin. Okay, so now only the how it was continued, say, in French mysticism. So we need another name to be introduced. It's Bernard of Clairvaux. This is a famous French mystic and a monk and saint also. Clairvaux. Clairvaux. Bernard of Clairvaux, I think like that. So he wrote a commentary on the book of the Bible, which is called Song of Songs. Well, if you read this book, returning to the love potions and this aphrodisiac theme, it seems like a story about love story, Song of Songs. This is a book from the Bible, Hebrew Bible, and also Christian Bible is part of the so-called Old Testament. So it is here is described the love between man and a woman, a very poetic description. But Bernard of Clairvaux started to interpret this love in a mystical way, as love between man's soul and God. And so he says, when he starts to interpret the first verse, kiss me with a kiss me with a kiss me with a kiss of your mouth. Yes, of your mouth. Well, this can be quite erotic from the first glance, but Bernard of Clairvaux uses the same principle as Dionysius, the principle of spiritual progress. And he introduces three kinds of kiss. Kiss of the step, of the well, how you call it, stapa, I think, step, or then
Foot. Foot.
stapa, foot. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So I will repeat it once again. This is a kind of a stupidity. Well, all my lecture is also a creation of human stupidity in a certain sense. I answer Bill to Mahato. So, so excuse me. Well, kiss of the foot. Okay. Well, in Latin, it's osculum pedis. Well, just because Bernard wrote in Latin, so it's osculum pedis. Okay. Now, for second is kiss of the arm, of the hand, better. Kiss of the hand. This is the third stage of the hand. Osculum manus in Latin. Manus. And the third is kiss in the mouth, of the mouth. So this is only the third stage. So you should start from kiss of the foot. And step by step, you sort of come to this last kiss, which is kiss of the mouth. Or osculum oris. Oris. It's in Latin. This is how it is in the original, okay? So why I insist on Latin is that you can take it into double commas and Google it, and you will eventually come to some scholarly book about Christian mysticism, or Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, or Song of Songs, and the tradition of its commentaries. So you understand. So here is the same as with Dionysius. So we start from purification, which is kiss of the foot, because feet are most dirty part of our organism. Then we go to illumination, to the hand, which is more noble than the foot. And at last we come to unity, which is kiss of the mouth, when two mouths sort of unite themselves in a kiss. It is the symbol of unity, okay? So here we have this mystical tradition of like ecstasy, or of spiritual progress, okay? So Bernard of Clairvaux, this is the 12th century already. So we are in the 12th century now. And the major opponent of Bernard of Clairvaux and his contemporary and also fellow Frenchman was Pierre Abelard. Pierre Abelard. Well, you know, perhaps there's also a love story, Abelard and Heloise. If you don't know, please, it is a part of culture, and Heloise. And maybe some of you have read Jean-Jacques Rousseau's novel, Julie, or Julia, or the New Heloise. So it is a new Heloise, then there should be an old Heloise. So this old Heloise is a like consort or Abelard, Heloise. So this was a Heloise, I think, like that. So so this is also a love story which is depicted in Abelard's book, History of My Calamities. Well, why calamities? So it was an unhappy love of a kind. History of My Calamities. It was written in Latin, but later translated into many languages, also in Russian. История моих бедствий. Well, you can read it in Russian, or you can, I think it is free in the internet, so it's not difficult to find it. What are the calamities of Abelard? Well, why he was different from Bernard? Because if Bernard insisted on mystical love, Abelard tried human love. He had a fellow student, he had a student, female student called Heloise, and he gave her lessons of, say, 7 liberal arts, or grammar, or rhetoric, logic, and while giving lessons, he fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him. So, but of course they could have married, and Heloise had a child from Abelard, so there was a easy solution that they could marry. But Heloise didn't want to marry Abelard because she said that it will hamper his intellectual activity. Why? Because in the Middle Ages, in the 12th century, only clerics had opportunity or chance to become like philosophers or theologians, give lectures or write some treatises and have a hearing. And if he married, then he would be just a lay person, and nobody will allow him to teach in cathedral schools or anywhere. So Heloise said that this marriage will sort of hamper his intellectual activity. So she was against it, and she decided to go to the monastery. So she became a nun. And well, I don't know what happened with the child, but well, not much is known about this child. It was a male child, but I don't know what happened from, well, I didn't concentrate my attention on the destiny of the child, but I know very well that Heloise became a nun and Abelard became a monk. And well, also it is calamity is here because the relatives of Heloise, because he didn't marry the Heloise, they hired some people who castrated Abelard, so he was delivered of his manhood. Okay, that's part of his calamities. Okay, but it didn't hamper, of course, his intellectual activities. It just hampered his sexual intercourses. But after Heloise, he didn't want any sexual experience, so he was quite happy in the monastery and continued with writing theological and philosophical treatises, among which I would mention one which seems very important for me. It's a dialogue between between philosopher, Jew and Christian, and dialogue between a philosopher, I would say, a philosopher, a Jew, and a Christian. Well, I write indefinite article because it's not a particular Jew, or particular Christian, or particular philosopher. So this is just any Christian, any philosopher, any Jew. So there are three partners in a dialogue. What is the difference between them? Philosopher just explains it very concisely that for a Jew and for a Christian, there is some sacred texts, say a Bible or a New Testament. You understand that the Jew considers, and a Christian, the Jew considers the Bible, the Torah or Tanakh, this Torah with the prophets, with the books of wisdom or historical books. He considers its sacred text, especially Torah. A Christian considers also New Testament a sacred text, also together with the Old Testament, which he interprets in a way different from the way the Jews interpret it. But a philosopher, he doesn't recognize any sacred text. He recognizes only a book of wisdom, or he believes in his own wisdom. He believes in mind, so human mind and human logic. So like a scientist of today. So he has no sacred texts, no sacred traditions, no revelation from above, but only natural reason, okay? So that makes a difference between them. And they sort of enter in such certain disputation. So you see, a Jew is and a Christian are different persons. So it means that the Jews, as I mentioned as I have mentioned to you, these Jews didn't embrace Christianity, okay? And now, even now, the majority of the Jews, say in Israel or in the United States or even in Russia, well, in Europe also, they have their synagogues and they do not attend Christian churches. There is a certain enmity between Jews and Christians, like there was enmity between Neoplatonists and Christians. But of course, this enmity is only superficial, because in the roots, there is of course much common. There are much more common between a Jew and a Christian than between a Christian and an atheist, for example, or a Jew and an atheist, because the principle of spirituality or God or prayer or atonement, they are all present both in Jewish tradition and Christian tradition. Well, of course, the differences exist, and they are not many, they are not few, but still, so the dialogue can take place. Well, this is the example of a discussion which started in the Middle Ages. And also from this discussion started the new, how to say, the new variant of philosophy, which is called scholasticism. Scholasticism. Well, I will explain the term scholasticism. What is the etymology of scholasticism? Etymology is that it comes from the word school. School. Or schola in Latin, or schola in Greek also. In Greek, originally, by some irony, it meant just time of rest. So schola is in Greek time of rest. So the philosophers used their time of rest to go in for philosophy. So then school was also named the adherents of a certain philosophical trend. So we can say Pythagorean school or Platonic school or Aristotelian school. It's like a kind of a program or kind of a trend in philosophy. Then there appeared schools as places of study. There were first they were called cathedral schools. So they were centered near Catholic cathedrals in Europe. Cathedral schools. So there people received education. Usually they were clerics, so lay persons were excluded. So if you wanted to receive education in the Middle Ages, you should be a cleric and you should be male. females received education only privately, like Heloise, whom her relatives found a personal tutor. So she couldn't attend publicly the cathedral school. And out of these cathedral schools in the 13th century or in the end of the 12th century, there were born first universities. And here I will ask Marina to show us the map of medieval universities. I think it is worth mentioning here. Yes, there is a map. Yes, here. Thank you very much. So you see how many universities were there. And so Paris, if we take France, so we start from Paris, from Bourges, Poitiers, Toulouse. Well, somewhere the dates of the foundation are put in brackets, somewhere not. But I can tell you that the University of Paris was created in the 13th century. The universities of Oxford and Cambridge, if you switch to England, they were created even earlier than the University of Paris, but also somewhere in the beginning or in the end of the 12th century or in the beginning of the 13th century. So all in all, there were about 100 universities in the beginning of the 16th century, everywhere. You see, even in Palma de Mallorca, there was a university, and it is maybe one of the most southern universities, also in Seville. And the most northern university is the University of Aberdeen and Edinburgh in Scotland, and also the University of Glasgow and the University of Uppsala in Sweden. So these are the most northern universities. The Eastern University is the University of Krakow. I think it is one of the most Eastern universities. Okay, so everywhere there were universities with more or less the same program. Thank you, Marina. I think I will write in chat now. So please stop the presentation, and I will write in chat these two words, which are trivium and quadrivium. These are Latin words which are very important to understand the structure of the university. Quadrivium. Well, what is trivium? Trivium is three subjects: grammar, rhetorics, and dialectics or logic. This trivium. Well, because this is the first part of the so-called 7 liberal arts, or the master of which gave person a degree of Master of Arts, MA. So they were called trivial later, and for beginners. So from this comes English word trivial, which means self-evident, and Russian word trivialny, which is more or less of the same meaning. So trivium, the originally in Latin it means 3 ways. Via is way, and tres means 3 in Latin, so trivium. Then follows quadrivium, or 4 ways. This is arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Well, more or less, this is no astronomy and music. This is also depicted on the engraving of Albrecht Dürer. These 7 liberal arts are on the mantle of this philosophy woman. And music. So there are 4 music. So there are 4, and all in all they make 7. So they are called, these 7 subjects are called 7 liberal arts. And for the person who mastered it was given the degree Master of Arts. Master of Arts. So more or less as today, arts. MA, the abbreviation is MA. Well, you can find this abbreviation on many titles of the books published in the 19th century, for example. Also, the example is the book of Charles Darwin, MA. So if you take the first edition, or maybe even the second edition of Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, or The Descent of Man, there you will find the name of the author in this way written: Charles Darwin, comma, M.A. So what does it mean, M.A.? That he was not a doctor, he was only Master of Arts. So it is the lowest degree, academic degree. So it can inspire you that Charles Darwin, as so prominent a person, was of very low academic, had the lowest academic degree possible. He finished Cambridge University, and in Cambridge University he received this Master of Arts. Okay, so now this is the first faculty, or Faculty of Arts. This is we can find in every medieval university. Then there will be a faculty, sometimes it's called Faculty of Philosophy also. That's the same, Faculty of Arts or Faculty of Philosophy. Then there, in every university, there was Faculty of Theology. If a person ended this faculty of, graduated from this Faculty of Theology, he received master degree in theology. Well, he had to give some commentaries on the Book of Sentences. So this was a book, a textbook in theology, written by one of the pupils of Abelard, Peter of Lombardy, or Peter Lombard, Liber Sententiarum, or Book of Sentences. There's a textbook in theology. And so if you receive the master degree in theology, you will be called Magister Sententiarum, or Master of Sentences. And if you want to proceed with theology, you will receive the degree Doctor of Divinity. It was also in England, so it still is. You can receive this Doctor of Divinity, DD. So if you study in Oxford on the theological faculty, even today, you can graduate from this faculty and receive the degree Doctor of Divinity, okay? Or maybe Master of Divinity also, but I don't know exactly. I'm not a specialist here. So you ask colleagues from Oxford, theologians. Well, usually they, after graduating from the theological faculty of, say, Oxford University, they receive Anglican orders and become Anglican priests. Well, this is how it goes in England today. Now there are also women priests, so women are also allowed to receive DD, Doctor of Divinity. Well, this is theology. Now there is also Faculty of Law, which is divided into ecclesiastical law and civil law. So a person could receive a degree in ecclesiastical law or in civil law, or as they say, in both laws. So in Latin it will be called in utroque iure. So in both laws, they could receive the degree. This will be Doctor of Law. Well, I don't know theology as a science. Well, in the Middle Ages, there was no other choice. It was a consensus. Okay. Now, of course, there can be different opinions on this subject. I've already told you that Christianity is somehow waning. Okay. Now, so perhaps this question is also a proof of it. So in the Middle Ages, this question couldn't have been put. You understand? Because I think mainly most of the universities were created with the, how to say, with the consent of the Roman Pope, who sent a certain letter called the Bulla, which officially proclaimed the establishing of the university. Well, we can find these collections in the archives of some universities, for example, Vienna University, of Prague University. Well, I don't know whether Oxford University was created by Pope himself or not. I just you better search the archives of Oxford University. So Christianity was born. Well, I've already explained you that Christianity is of Jewish origin. It was born in the Middle East. According to the New Testament, Jesus Christ was a teacher and a prophet. And later there was understood that he was God himself, God incarnated. But for the Jews, he still remains a teacher and a false prophet, because the Jews say that he's not a Messiah, which they expect somewhere in the future. Okay, but we can say there was a historical Jesus and the Jesus of the Gospels. So as it was a historical Socrates and the Socrates of the Plato's dialogues. So there's the problem, which of course can be solved, but is solved differently. If you are a Christian and a believer, so you will believe that the New Testament is divinely inspired book and contains a revelation. If you are agnostic, you will say that this is one of the books that are perhaps part of human culture, but have nothing divine in it. Okay. Scholasticism is the attempt to discuss theological questions by philosophical methods. Okay, so for example, if we say God exists, we can take it as an article of faith and say, well, God exists and that's all. I believe that God exists and he answers my prayers and he cares for me and he loves me. This is my inner experience and inner I'm convinced, conviction, okay, inner conviction. But also you can prove the existence of God, and that will be scholasticism. Well, I will give only one example of scholasticism, is Anselm of Canterbury. And so before we'll take another 5 minutes rest. Anselm of Canterbury. He lived in the 11th century, and he was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Well, I will not speak much about Canterbury, just Google Canterbury. Audio stopped working? No, I'm not sure, because my microphone is...
No, it's working okay. It's working okay.
Anselm of Canterbury. So he lived in the 11th century, shortly prior to Abelard. And he developed a proof of the existence of God, which is called ontological proof. Well, we'll have, there's a great tradition of this ontological proof. We find it in Descartes. It was criticized by Thomas Aquinas and by Kant. It was again like advocated by Hegel. And even Marx considered that ontological proof has something there, because Marx was like influenced by Hegel. What does it mean? Briefly, it's the idea that because God is perfect by definition, to his perfection must be attributed also his existence, because existence is perfection. If you have, according to Kant's allegory, if you have 100 imaginary dollars or thalers, well, which is more or less the same. Thaler and dollar are the same currency, more or less. Thaler in Germany and dollars in the United States. But so, what is the difference between 100 imaginary dollars and 100 real dollars? So, according to this scale of perfection, you could say that to have real dollars is better than to have only imaginary dollars. To have dollars in reality in your purse is better than to have them only in your imagination. So this the same with God. To have imaginary God or God in my imagination is not so perfect as to have a real God who can really help you. For example, who can really answer your prayers. So the concept of imaginary God is an imperfect concept. So imaginary God is not perfect, but according to our definition, God is perfect. So God cannot be imaginary. Either there would be a contradiction with its definition. So God must exist in order to correspond to its definition, okay? So, Kant said that this, or Thomas Aquinas also said that this proof is not valid, because you cannot, how to say, go from a, how to say, multitude, well, how to say exactly множество in English? The mathematician.
A set.
Huh?
A set.
A set, yes. We cannot, there are a set of imaginary beings and there's a set of real beings. So you cannot move from one set to another. This is forbidden. So, God as a concept will remain the best of imaginary concepts, but it cannot become real because this, how to say, the bridge between imaginary and real does not exist. More or less the same was the idea of Immanuel Kant. But Hegel said that perhaps because being and non-being are like contradictions, but contradictions somehow are principles of rules of the true. So this dialectic perhaps allows the the, how to say, the like the equality between your thinking and real being. This is called well, the how to say тождество also in
Equal.
equality, but also there is another word, identity. Yes, better. So there is a principle which is called by Hegel the identity of thinking and reality, and being. So if some idea appears in your mind, it must correspond to something real. In Russian, it's тождество бытия и мышления. Okay, so identity of thinking and reality. So Marx adds to that well, I mean, allegory of these dollars. So if you have 100 imaginary dollars, but you believe that they are real, so you can make debts, for example, or you can count on them that they will help you, okay? So you will behave as a man who has real dollars, okay? For example, propose to a woman because you say, I'm rich, and I will propose her to marry me because he has in his imagination that concept that he's rich, although he is of course in reality poor. But this behavior maybe lead to some consequences. So these imaginary dollars, they sort of behave as if real, well, influence as if they are real. And also Marx continues, well, if we take dollars, if we bring them to a tribe which doesn't know paper money, they will just don't know how to use them. For them, they will be real dollars, will be just paper. As I remember one story, how a young a child of maybe 3 years of age found somewhere hidden some dollar banknotes, which and started to make the snowflakes out of them with her scissors. Yes, so when the parents saw, they were just a little bit sort of how to say, uh, well, you understand the reaction of her parents when they saw that she cuts their dollars, which they kept safe in some maybe a hidden place, and she found them and she made snowflakes out of them. So this is that dollar is also like we ourselves sort of make it real by our decision, okay? So the reality of currency is only product of our consensus. So if everybody agrees, like in the Middle Ages, that God exists, so they start to build cathedrals, and cathedrals are real. You cannot say they are imaginary. So out of this imaginary concept follows some real actions, the Crusades, the fires of the Inquisition, the cathedrals, the books, textbooks of theology. Well, a lot of things follow out of this. So ontological proof is something very, very, I would say, well, it's a kind of a trick. Well, maybe we can say hocus pocus, but it has something in it because so many philosophers discussed it from different angles. So it made some contribution to the history of philosophy, I would say. So this is scholasticism. This is an example of scholasticism. So not to believe, but to try to prove what you believe. This is in Latin. It is fides querens intellectum, or faith that seeks understanding. Faith. This is the, I think, the best definition of scholasticism. Faith that seeks understanding. And if you want another definition, more scholarly, you just take the Latin phrase of the same, only in Latin, and try to put it in double commas, and then you will get some scholarly book on history of scholasticism. Fides querens intellectum. This is the same, faith that seeks understanding. This is a famous dictum of St. Anselm. Fides querens intellectum. And if you just put it in double commas, you will find a good book on the history of scholasticism. So it's very easy. Now all things become easy. And Well, shall we make a 5 minutes rest or just finish it? What is your opinion, Marina? Are you tired of following my lecture?
As for me, I'm fine.
Yes, then we'll just skip this last break, and I will try because only 25 minutes is left. So you can make your own breaks if you feel tired. So I will just continue because scholasticism takes us to the core of the matter, because scholasticism developed in Europe and brought some results. First result of scholasticism was the exception or introducing of Aristotle, Aristotle's philosophy, Aristotelism, we can say, Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotelian, I think, like that, philosophy. Well, I'm answering now the question of Alexei Fedosiev. Was the scholasticism addressed by Neoplatonists or later? So there is a break between Neoplatonists and scholasticism because scholastics sort of embraced Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotle, and not Neoplatonism. Yes, maybe in Hinduism there were no sacred books, but there were also Vedas and sutras, for example. The most famous perhaps is Kama Sutra or Upanishadi. Yes, Kumar, single book, yes. Well, this is a tradition of, well, you cannot say that Upanishadi is just a book among others. So something sacred there is in this book. Also several like lives and teachings of Buddha also are considered more or less sacred. In Muslim religion, Quran is considered a sacred book. So there is a tradition of sacred literature. But scholasticism, in which way does it differ from this tradition and also from Neoplatonism? Is that it embraced from the start or from the 13th century, not from the start, but from the 13th century, when Aristotle's treatises were translated from Arabic into Latin and later in this century from Greek into Latin. So there appeared like a corpus or corpse of Aristotelian works, which were much commented upon also by such celebrated schoolmen and theologians as Albert the Great and Thomas Aquinas. Both were Dominican monks. Well, I can speak a lot about the order of St. Dominic, the order of preachers, and its contribution to scholasticism, but I would say read it yourself, read the poem of Dante, especially the Paradise. There you will find St. Dominic, St. Francis, and other celebrated monks of the Middle Ages. About St. Francis, we will speak on Thursday when we'll speak about Renaissance. But now we'll just take these two names, Albert the Great and Thomas Aquinas. They both wrote theological treatises with a Summa Theology, Sum of Theology. It is in English. Also Albert and Thomas Aquinas, Sum of Theology or Summa Theologiae. Albert was older, so Thomas was his pupil. So they both did more or less the same thing. They commented on Aristotle and they wrote textbooks in theology. And well, if we take textbook of theology, I will give you only one example of what is scholasticism of the 13th century. So, for example, first of all, for example, Thomas Aquinas, if he deals with some question, he put it also with a question mark. That's why it's called question. So, for example, does God exist? This question is ended with question mark. Does God exist? So this is like a problem. This is not affirmation. This is a problem to be solved. And a question mark, okay? Does God exist? And if you start a question, Thomas Aquinas and also Albert, they started with with objections. Objection. So how can we object against the existence of God? So the first objection Thomas Aquinas found himself. This is, and he gives it. The objection is formulated in this way. God is perfect good, and infinite good, but evil is opposed to good. So if there are two opposite principles, but one of them is infinite, so it must necessarily destroy the opposing principle. So good must necessarily destroy evil. But we see evil in the world. It's obvious that evil exists. That means that God is not either not good or not infinite. So God doesn't exist. I mean that God doesn't exist as infinite goodness. Okay, so this is the first objection. Well, you can see that it is interesting that a person can think in such a way in the 13th century. So he can imagine like the position or the arguments of an atheist. So he's not sort of you remember I told you that Aristotle tried to understand the arguments of Democritus. So the same way a theologian tries to understand the arguments of an atheist, sort of. This is the first argument. The second argument also is very interesting against the existence of God, which Thomas Aquinas sort of formulates himself. All that we see is, well, it starts with a preamble that what can be explained by fewer principles shouldn't be explained by sort of more principles. Then like economy of thinking, we can say. So, but all that we see are either the product of nature or of human mind. So God is like not necessary to introduce God. So God is not necessary for explanation of all that we see. So God doesn't exist because he is not necessary. We can explain everything without the concept of God. So these are two objections. Then follows the 5 proofs of the existence of God in the corpse or in the middle of the question, and then follow answers to the objections. So I don't want now, because we have not much time, I don't want to meddle into theological discussion. I would only say that this is the structure of Thomas Aquinas and Albert's Sum of Theology. So there are objections, then there are theses developed or proved, and then answers to objections. There are some maybe curious questions. For example, whether a man can teach another man. And also the objection is that he cannot teach. One man cannot teach another. So I'm doing a job which doesn't exist, sort of, which has no meaning, because one man cannot teach the other. And the objection is that a man either explains which is already known, or he explains which cannot be understood. For example, if I give a lecture in Chinese, you will not understand anything. So it seems that if I give a lecture in English, so perhaps you already know what I'm speaking about. So, or you can easily find it in the internet. So it seems that one man cannot teach another. Well, Thomas Aquinas answers this objection by certain argument. He says that the pupil is in, like he says, in potentia, or in possibility of knowledge. So what does the teacher do? He leads a pupil from the possibility to the actuality. So you have in possibility, you have this knowledge, only it's not actual with you. So I lead you from potentiality to actuality. Well, like a fire which and ignites the wood. The wood can be ignited, so they have fire in possibility. But what they need is the ignition. Okay, well, you understand, spichki. I have forgotten this simple word.
Matches.
Yes, matches. So you need matches in order to ignite the wood. Okay, so the teacher is a person who ignites other people's minds. Okay. Well, ontological proof is also discussed by Thomas Aquinas in his Sum of Theology, but he does agree with Anselm. I already told you that he considers this proof not valid. So also they didn't translate Greek words into Latin, but they used the already existing They were not translators themselves, but they used the translations and commented on the works of Aristotle. So, for example, Aquinas knew the name of Democritus and even mentioned him several times in Sum of Theology and in his commentaries to Aristotle. So he also tried to understand what does it mean to be a materialist. Well, it means that he had a broad intellect, so he could understand other people's position. But he himself, of course, remained Christian. He didn't change his ideology, okay? So this, but how to say, this way of dealing with arguments and counter arguments, objections, and so on, this is called scholasticism. I think this, how to say, this tradition of scholasticism, this culture of argumentation, it was positive because it made the minds of men more acute. This is the thesis of positivists. For example, Auguste Comte, in the 19th century. Auguste Comte, the founder of positivism, or of the philosophy of science, he said that this metaphysical stage was like more advanced than the religious stage. So at first there was just religion, or Christianity as a religion. Then followed scholasticism, or metaphysical stage, when people start to discuss religious concepts as with the help of Aristotelian method. So they discuss them as categories or as abstract concepts. So God became not a real thing or idol, but he became an abstract concept of, say, divine nature or something, that the perfect nature, or, the principle of supreme good. but it was already discussed whether God can exist or not exist. For just a believer, this is not even blasphemous. If you ask a simple believer to prove the existence of God, it is like one told me, it is the same as to prove the existence of your wife. If you so enter into a chamber, bed chamber with your wife, and then say, well, prove me that you are my wife, show me your passport. This will create like a kind of a tension between you and your wife, okay? So she will be sort of scandalized with this lack of trust in her, okay? So the same with God. If you try to prove the existence of God, it seems that your faith is lacking, okay? That you have some doubts in, and this can be scandalous also and offensive to God himself, that you try to prove his existence. So you see, this also we should mention, because the majority of my audience are Russians, that in Russia there was no tradition of scholasticism. All these universities ended with the border of Lithuania. So in Russia itself, during the period even the Terrible, there were no universities. So the first universities were started by Peter the Great. Okay, so Russians sort of lagged behind, this tradition. And maybe it explains partly some peculiar features of Russian character. So this lack of scholastic tradition of argumentation, tradition of scholarly discourse, okay? Even of theological problems, you see. For example, of course, you can be sort of amazed at such questions as whether man can teach angels. This is the next question in the Sum of Theology. First, the question, if man can teach another man, this seems plausible. But the next question, if man can teach angels, this seems quite irrational. Or whether angel can teach another angel. This is why Thomas was called Dr. Angelicus, or the angelic doctor. He spoke a lot about angels. And if you just think that angels are imaginary beings, then perhaps all these passages from Summa Theologia will seem just quite ununderstandable. Maybe in Orthodox Church there are no scholastic tradition, but in the Byzantine theology, for example, Gregory Palamas, this is a celebrate Palamas. Well, as a celebrate Byzantine theological, he was more or less scholastic in his mind. He was also just arguing and having polemics with his opponents. And also it is interesting that in the 14th century, the Sum of Theology of Thomas Aquinas was translated into Greek. So the Greeks of the late Byzantine Empire were somehow knew the essentials of scholasticism. So they differed only in their creeds, but the method was more or less the same. So I cannot say that Orthodox Christians have no scholastic theology. They have it, but maybe in another form. But the tradition of arguments are there in Orthodox tradition, and also in the Muslim tradition, of course. There is a Kalam theological school, this like more akin to like natural theology. So Muslim theologians start with proving the existence of God from using the arguments from purposefulness of creation, the complexity of beings that we find, especially living beings. And so you can find in Muslim literature a lot of arguments in favor of the existence of God. Also, you can find it in Jewish tradition. Um, well, I think this arguments and dialogues and logic, like logical methods, are sort of characteristic feature of the whole scholastic period. And just, I have only 5 minutes just to start a new theme, that when scholastics commented on Aristotle's work, they also, in the 14th century, for example, they divided the whole text of Aristotle into certain questions. And so, like in some of theology. And so there appeared the question, for example, does the earth move, or it is immobile in the center of the world? So this question is put with a question mark. Does the earth move? So already there's some progress, because for Aristotle it was self-evident that the earth didn't move but was immobile in the center of the world. But for scholastics, it was a question. And as is typical for scholastic treatises, they started to find objections. So it seems that the earth is not stationary, but it moves. First of all, because it needs influences from the sky. And what is in need of some influences, for example, heat and light of the sun, must move, because sun itself has no need of earth, but earth needs the sun. So it is more logical than the earth should rotate around its axis, sort of like being sort of prepared, like on a certain fire, like when you prepare meat, roast meat on fire, you sort of turn it, you know, the shampoo or this when you roast the meat, okay? And don't, well, in Russian it's viertel, but I think there is an English word also for that. But you understand how you roast your meat, okay? So you're turning it just one side, then another side, and you don't turn the fire around the meat, but you turn the meat, you understand, itself. It's more economical, okay? So the same, this argument was used by, say, Albert of Saxony, while discussing the question of the rotation of the earth. So they invented some arguments, then they answered these objections. Well, of course, they held to Aristotelian view that the earth is immobile, but these objections, they created some kind of, you understand, some kind of an uneasiness, whether Aristotle is right or wrong, because these objections seemed so plausible and so convincing that perhaps some future Copernicus could have been seduced by them, okay? So this is the contribution of this scholastic method in further sort of development of science. Well, Crusades was an unhappy episode, because when inter armas silent muse, you know, this is a Latin Latin aphorism. When the arms began to be used, the muses become silent. So I think that the Crusades were, I think, distracting for the development of science. When the Crusades ended in the 13th century, there started the development of the universities and scholastic tradition and learning and so on. So I think Crusades influenced negatively. Well, only in part we can say that the Crusaders brought some manuscripts from Byzantium, because the Fourth Crusade, as you know, ended with siege and sacking of Constantinople. And so many maybe manuscripts, especially the works of Aristotle, began to be known in the West through like trophies of the Crusaders. But we have only 2 minutes, so I cannot unfortunately answer all the questions. So, well, and I don't want to be an apologist of the Middle Ages. I think many cruel things happened at that time, and many intolerance was there present, and the Inquisition also. So I don't want to appear as a apologist. So I understand this complex period, but still there were some like shoots of something good there. Okay, shoots. Yes, shoots. So with that happy note, I will end my lecture. I will thank Marina for helping me and with the slides and with her patience with me. And next time, I hope we'll meet on Thursday and we'll discuss Renaissance, a much more sort of optimistic epoch. Okay, so now I'm just wishing you a good day, a rest of the what is still resting of the day, and I hope that we'll meet on Thursday at the appointed time, and we'll continue our discussions and we'll enter more optimistic epoch. Okay. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, especially Marina and others also who were listening and taking part in chat also, which is inspiring. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.